Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. In case you're new here, I'm Jennifer. Today is going to be a little bit of a different kind of video because we are going to be making a big batch of breakfast burritos that we're going to keep in the freezer. And while we're doing that, we are going to be doing some meal prep that is going to make my life quite a bit easier in the future. So I have a bunch of ingredients that I'm going to be getting out and prepping. So in our breakfast burritos, one of the ingredients that we're going to be using is this sharp cheddar cheese. So you can see this is a lot of cheese. We are not going to need anywhere near this much in our breakfast burritos. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to shred up this entire block of cheese. We're going to set some aside for our burritos, and then I'm going to package up the rest of this into individual freezer bags just to make it a lot easier and more accessible to use when I need to use it. We're probably going to end up freezing most of it so that none of it goes bad. I'm going to be scrambling up all these eggs. This is just over 30 eggs. I think I wanted to do about 30 breakfast burritos, so I'm thinking 1 egg per burrito, so 30, but I grabbed a couple extra because a few of these eggs are small. So I think this is about 32 or 33 eggs. So we're going to be scrambling all this up. This will all be for the breakfast burritos. There won't be any meal prep for this, but I figured I would just show you. Now you can see these eggs look a little bit frosted. That's because these are all water glass eggs. Sometime over the summer, I think in June, we water glassed a bunch of eggs together, and now our chickens are starting to lay again. We still have quite a few water glass eggs left. I definitely want to make sure that we get through all of those. So one project that we're going to be doing is making these breakfast burritos. So that will get through a lot of eggs for us. Another thing that I need to get through are these potatoes. You can see they're not quite beautiful and pristine anymore. They're starting to soften up a little bit. They were starting to get eyes. So I went through, I picked all the eyes off, I washed all these potatoes. So we're going to be grating these all up into hash browns. I'm going to roast those in the oven. Those are going to go into our breakfast burritos as well. We also have some big onions here. I've got 4 of these onions. I'm going to be caramelizing these up, and I'm going to put these in about half of the breakfast burritos. My kids prefer them without onions, so we won't be putting onions in half of them, but they're definitely better with onions in my opinion. So if you like caramelized onions, definitely put them in. The final ingredient that we're going to be prepping for our breakfast burritos is bacon. Now I have 8 packages of bacon here. This is nitrate-free bacon from my local Aldi. I don't go to Aldi very often, so when I do, I like to stock up. So what I do is I usually buy about 8 packages of bacon at once. I'll put maybe 2 of them in the fridge just to use for whatever. I'll stick a couple of them in the freezer for longer term storage. And then what I will do is I will chop up the rest. I'll cook them all. Then I'll freeze them and store them in freezer bags in the freezer. And then that cooked chopped bacon is great for throwing in something where you just need a little bit of bacon. Like for example, if you're making a pizza, you can just grab a little handful of the pre-cooked bacon and sprinkle it on top of your pizza. It's great in a quiche, it's great in an omelet. There's just so many great ways to use it, and it makes your life a lot easier to have that pre-cooked. So we're going to need, I'm not actually sure exactly how much we'll need for our burritos. I'm estimating probably 1 or 2 full packages of bacon, but I'm gonna go ahead and cook up all 8 packages, and then whatever we don't use for the burritos will get put in our freezer to use in the future. So because caramelized onions take so long to cook, this is going to be what we start with first. I'm going to chop these up. I'm going to get them in this large frying pan with a little bit of butter. We're going to cook those on a really low heat, and those will just continue cooking while we prep the rest of our ingredients. So before we start chopping our onions, I'm just going to grab probably about 1.5 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons of butter. Get that in our pan here. Just going to put this over a low heat, probably like a medium low heat. Now to caramelize these onions, I'm just going to cut the stem end off. I'm going to peel them. If you ever make bone broth, you can go ahead and stick the ends and the peels of the onions in a freezer bag in your freezer. And then the next time you go to make broth, you can go ahead and pull all that out and throw it in your broth, and it will add some great extra flavor to it. I actually have a crock pot of bone broth going here right now that's going to be finishing up tomorrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my peels and ends right in here to give this a little bit extra flavor as it cooks. Now I have heard some people say that for caramelized onions it's better to actually cut this way across the grain. I have no idea if there's any truth to that or not. I just always cut this way because it's what I'm used to. But if you know, if it is better to cut the other way and there's any reason behind it, can you let me know in the comments? Because I'm not sure about that. I'm curious about it. If that is a better way, then I would like to know so that I can switch to that. For today, we're just going to cut it the way that I'm used to cutting it. All right, so we've got all our onions into the pan. Now you can see this pan looks really overcrowded, but if you've ever caramelized onions before, you know that once they really get going, they'll cook down to almost nothing. I'm not sure if we will need all of these onions in our breakfast burritos or not, but if we have extra, I'll just stick them in the fridge and use them over the next couple days, or I'll stick them in the freezer and I can use them sometime in the future. So we're just going to go ahead and let these onions be. I'm going to stir them every once in a while. We'll just kind of let them cook low and slow. While these are cooking, let's get started shredding up our cheese. Now, before we continue on, I should say, I actually meant to say this at the beginning, these breakfast burritos are not my original idea. I know a lot of people make breakfast burritos like this. I actually first saw these on Acre Homestead. Becky over from Acre Homestead does a lot of meal prep. I really like watching her channel because she gives me some great ideas for meal prep. And recently she did a cooking day where she made a bunch of breakfast burritos, kind of similar to this, and they looked so good. So I decided that I needed to try that. So I decided I would take you guys along for the ride. But if you're interested in more great meal prep ideas, go ahead and check out her channel because she really does do some great meal prep. So if you're going to be grating a lot of cheese at once, I find it is a lot faster to use the food processor. So you can just use this grater attachment on the food processor and just stick it on there. Because we're going to be grating up that big, almost 5.5 pound block of cheese, that would take a lot of time and effort to grate by hand. So we are going to be using our food processor today. Now we're also going to be using this food processor to grate up the potatoes to make hash browns. I decided to do the cheese first because I don't want to have to wash it in between. And not all of this cheese is destined for the breakfast burritos. Some of it's going to be sticking in the fridge for other meals or the freezer. And I didn't want to do the potato first and then have potato get on the cheese. That's not going to be used for this project. All of the potatoes that I have are going in these burritos. So if a little bit of cheese gets on the potatoes, then that's completely fine. Thus why we're doing cheese first. So I'm basically just going to open this cheese up and cut it into chunks that will fit into my food processor and then grate it all up. This is going to take several batches, I can tell you, from the last time I did this. All right, so our giant block of cheese is cut into a bunch of much smaller blocks. So those will fit to feed into the food processor. So we're just going to go ahead and get that all grated up. All right, so our cheese is all prepped and shredded up. This is what's left that I think I'm going to use for the breakfast burritos. If this ends up not being enough, I can pull some out of the bags that I filled up. If this is too much, I'll set up another bag. But we got 5 bags like this, so I'm going to stick probably one of these in the fridge, and I'll put the other 4 in the freezer just to make sure that they stay fresh. All right, so I emptied out our food processor. This is the cheese I'm setting aside for our burritos. Now I've got all these potatoes. I'm going to grate these up exactly the same way that I grated the cheese. And you'll notice I did not wash the food processor. There's bits of cheese on there. That's fine because all of these potatoes will be going in the burritos and they'll be getting cheese on them anyway. So that's completely fine. I did also preheat my oven to 400 degrees because we are going to cook these potatoes in the oven. I think that it will be easier to cook them that way along with everything else we have going on the stovetop. I think it would be a little too much to be doing these on the stovetop too. So these are going to go in the oven. So let's go ahead and get these potatoes all grated up. Now, as I said, all of these potatoes will be going in the breakfast burritos, but if you have extra potatoes, you can make frozen hash browns this way too. I've definitely done this several times, where you just grate all your potatoes in the food processor. Then I pull all the grated potatoes out and soak them in a bowl of cold water for a couple minutes. That kind of pulls some of the starch out of them and helps them to freeze without clumping together as much. They still do clump together some, but it makes it a little bit better, and supposedly it makes them cook up a little bit crispier. So that's how I do it. And then I just flash freeze them flat on a cookie sheet. Once they're frozen, I'll scoop them into a freezer bag, and then you can just cook them straight from frozen. So for today, we're just going to get these grated. I'm not going to bother soaking them in water since they're just going to be cooked immediately. So I'm just laying these hash browns out on this cookie sheet. I'm honestly probably making this layer a little bit thicker than is ideal. But because I'm putting them into a burrito, I'm not going to be as concerned with them getting quite as crispy. So I think it'll still work fine. Well, we'll see. This is kind of thicker than I thought it would be. We'll see if it works fine. I'll let you know. All right, friends, I thought better of it. I decided to go ahead and put some hash browns on the second cookie sheet. One of my silicone baking mats is in the dishwasher right now, so I was hoping just to get it all in one cookie sheet, but I decided to just use some parchment paper and do a second cookie sheet. So we are just going to toss these with a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of salt. If I was just cooking these to eat plain, I would probably have either grated up some onion to include with it as well, or I would be using onion powder. Since these are going in breakfast burritos and they're going to have onions in with them anyway, I'm going to leave that out. We're just going to do it really simple with olive oil and salt. Then I'm going to toss these in my 400-degree oven. I am going to check on them after about 15 minutes. I think that they will need a little bit longer than that, but we'll check on them at that point just to make sure. Alright, so our hash browns are in the oven. In the meantime, let's check on our onions and see how those are doing. You can see they're starting to get a little bit translucent, but they're cooking really low and slow. That's the way to get the best caramelized flavor out of them. So we're just going to keep these going for a little bit. I haven't salted them or anything yet. I'm going to salt them a little bit later once they get closer to being done. Alright, so all our ingredients are working except for our bacon, so it's time to get our bacon going. I have a big skillet set up on my stovetop, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up 2 packages of bacon at a time. We're just going to saute them in that skillet until they're nice and crispy. Alright, so our first batch of bacon is done cooking. I'm just going to scoop the bacon out onto this paper towel with a slotted spoon and let it cool. So now, just to really make sure I get the most bang for my buck and the most out of this food, when I do a big batch of bacon cooking like this, I will take all the bacon fat and save it in this jar, and then I'll stick it in my freezer and freeze it. And then this makes a great thing to cook with. It can be a great substitute for butter or oil when you need to cook something in it, like onions, hash browns, anything like that. It tastes really good cooked in bacon grease. So when I cook a lot of bacon like this, it makes a lot of grease. So I'm going to go ahead and pour the grease into this jar. That way we can save that too. So see this, we got almost a whole cup of bacon grease from cooking 2 packages of bacon, so it would really be a shame to waste that. Now if that's something you're going to use right away, you can store it in your fridge instead. I like to put it in my freezer because that gives me a little more leeway as far as how long I have to use it up. Alright, so I did go ahead and pull the hash browns out of the oven. You can see they're a little bit crispy on top. They're not going to be crispy all the way through. That's mainly because I made such a thick layer of them. I did leave them in for probably close to half an hour, which again was because I made such a thick layer. If you did not layer them as thickly as I did, you could probably get away with between 20 to 25 minutes. But again, that really depends on your oven. Now, I tested them when they came out of the oven, and I thought they needed a little bit of salt. So I did go ahead and add some salt to them. So I'm just going to let those sit over here on the counter and cool. Now, I'll show you how our onions and everything else is doing. So I did go ahead and salt these onions. They're pretty close to being done, but I want to let them cook a little bit more. You can see some of them are kind of starting to get a little bit of a caramelized color. I just want to let them go until all of them start to look a little more caramelized. Over here, this is our 3rd batch of bacon cooking. So this is our 5th and 6th packs of bacon. So I have a bowl of bacon set aside here for our burritos, and I already put 1 quart-size bag of bacon into the fridge. I'm thinking this may actually be the last batch of bacon that I cook today. I think I just might freeze the other 2 packs of bacon whole to use in recipes like that. We do have 2 nice jars of bacon grease that we can freeze once they cool off. In here now, I think I'm just going to discard some of the extra grease. I'm going to leave a little bit of it in the pan here because we do need to scramble our eggs. So we're going to use that bacon grease to scramble all our eggs once this bacon's done cooking. Okay, so our bacon is done, our hash browns are done, our onions are cooking, they're almost done. What we need to do now is get our eggs scrambling. So here I've laid out all the eggs. These were water glass eggs that we made together last summer. I thoroughly rinsed them and wiped them all off. When you're eating water glass eggs, you want to make sure before you crack them open that you wash the shell very thoroughly because they're preserved with pickling lime. And while that is great at preserving eggs, it's not really something that you want to be eating a lot of. So I washed those. So we're going to be scrambling them in this bowl. What I am going to do though, I do this with eggs anyway, but especially because these are water glass, I'm going to crack them individually into a mug and then dump them in here one at a time. That way if we get one that's bad, it's not going to spoil our entire batch. Because we have, I think, about 32 eggs here, one spoiling the entire batch could mean losing a lot of eggs. So we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm just going to collect all my eggshells here. Normally I feed the eggshells back to the chicken, but since these eggs were water glass and there's pickling lime on the shells, I'm not going to be giving these to the chickens. I'm just going to collect them in this container. So we're just going to step over here and check on our onions for a minute. You can see they're getting a real nice color. I did turn up the heat a little bit. When I'm caramelizing onions, I like to have them go low and slow for quite a while, and then for the last few minutes I turn up the heat a little bit just to give them a nice color. I don't know if you can see in this pan here, there's little bits of brown stuck to the pan. I wanted to try to scrape as much of that off as I could. So I deglaze the pan by pouring a couple tablespoons of hot water into the pan and kind of stirring the onions around, and that really picks up all that brown goodness on the bottom of the pan. Those brown specks have a great flavor, so you want to make sure you pick them up and include those with your onions. All right, so we got all our eggs cracked into this bowl. I am glad that I cracked them individually because I did actually have one that was bad, which is actually very unusual. I always crack them individually just in case, and that was probably only the second egg in my life I found that was bad, but I am glad that the rest of these eggs were not spoiled. So you can scramble these eggs up however you normally make your scrambled eggs. I'm going to add a little bit of salt and pepper, and then I'm going to add either some milk or some heavy cream. I'm going to see what's in my fridge that I feel like adding. Any kind of dairy would be fine. So basically, however you make your scrambled eggs. I do normally put cheese in my scrambled eggs. I'll be leaving that out this time since there will be cheese in the burritos. But aside from that, I'm just going to make them the way I normally make them. So I'm going to go ahead and cook these eggs in the same pan that I cooked the bacon in. I removed most of the fat from the bacon, but I did leave a little bit behind to cook the eggs with. So I'm just going to pour this right in here. All right, so everything's done. We're finally ready to assemble our tortillas. I'm going to show you how I have everything set up here. So I'm going to do 15 burritos that have onions. So I have 15 tortillas laid out on my plate here. Then after that, I'm going to do 15 without onions for my kids. So we'll do those now. You can see over here I have our plate of hash browns. I've got the caramelized onions, bacon, scrambled, and over here's cheese. So I'm just going to go down this like an assembly line. I'm going to pile up the finished burritos on this plate here. I'm going to get them all wrapped up. Once they're all done, I'm going to wrap them all with plastic wrap and get them in the freezer. I think I'm just going to go in the order that I have here. I'm going to start with a little bit of hash brown. I'm going to just try to distribute everything evenly. We'll see how well that works. So we'll do some onion next. Then a little bit of bacon. Scoop of scrambled egg. Scrambled egg is still hot, a little hot to touch. Little bit of shredded cheese right on top. Then I'm just going to fold this and roll it up. Let's see if I can do this neatly. The answer is no, I cannot do it neatly, but hopefully by the end, I'll get the hang of it. So let's just keep going down our assembly line and getting these all put together. All right, so we've got our burritos all done and wrapped. This is the pile of burritos without onions. I have another pile the same size that has the caramelized onions in it. So I am just gonna stick these all in the freezer. Now this was definitely a big project. You could make it a little bit simpler if you wanted to by using frozen hash browns or using pre-shredded cheese. Any of those things would make it a little bit simpler. or by preparing any of the ingredients ahead of time, or you can just make a big day of it like we did here. Either way, I hope that you guys are encouraged to try a little bit of meal prep. It definitely does make your life so much easier. So in addition to the burritos, we actually shredded up a lot of cheese that we have ready for us. We have some bacon pre-cooked that's in our freezer, some bacon fat that we can use to cook other meals with. So overall, this is going to make our lives quite a bit easier. All right, so all of our breakfast burritos are frozen. I pulled one out of the freezer to have for lunch today. So we are just going to go stick this in the microwave and see how it is. So Dan made one of these already, and he told me that the perfect amount of time to cook it in the microwave was to do it for 2 minutes on medium power, 50% power, and then 30 seconds on high. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to give it a try. So we're going to go ahead and take off the plastic wrap first. We don't want to be microwaving that. All right, so my breakfast burrito, or in this case lunch burrito, is all microwaved and hot. Let's cut into it and see how it looks. That looks good. You can see that steam coming off of it, nice and hot. So I think Dan was right with that being the perfect amount of time. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in my kitchen while I made these breakfast burritos. I know we're really going to enjoy these. I will say, even though I cooked this with you guys on the video, we have all already tried one in my family and we do all really like them. So while it is quite a bit of work to put together a big batch of burritos like this, I think overall it saves quite a bit of work because now we all have 7 or 8 breakfasts or lunch each already prepared and done. So I hope that you guys are inspired to try some meal prep. If you give these burritos a try, definitely let me know how you like them. We've been really happy with them. You could definitely play around with the ingredients in these as well if you want to kind of mix it up a little bit. Breakfast sausage would be really good in here instead of bacon, or maybe even in addition to bacon. Or you could maybe throw some tomatoes in there. I've thought about throwing some chopped tomatoes in there. I haven't tried that yet, but that's on my list, so I may try that at some point. Either way, if you guys experiment with these, let me know what you do. Let me know how you like them. So I hope you guys are having a great day. I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye guys. I'll see you next time.